Greetings fellow Whovians and welcome to Timey Wimey Review. With it being Doctor Who's 60th anniversary month, I thought it's best that we go back in time, back to the very first Doctor Who story, An Unearthly Child, originally broadcast on BBC One on Saturday the 23rd of November 1963. Just in case you don't know the plot, the story begins with two very critical school teachers, Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright, who are very concerned about one of their students known as Susan. This student is absolutely brilliant at some subjects but can be absolutely hopeless in some other aspects, and so naturally these teachers are concerned. So what do? They decide to follow Susan home one night. Call the police, I would say. Nah, I'm kidding. Basically, they want to speak to their parent or guardian about Susan's school life. And so they decide to, like I said, follow her home. However, the address they were given is that of a junkyard. And actually Susan goes in there. So Ian and Barbara do follow, but all they find is a mysterious old man who is guarding some kind of police box. Fearing that the old man has trapped Susan inside this police box, Ian and Barbara have this argument and fight their way through. And it's not a police box, oh no, it is a giant console room where this police box is disguised as a spaceship that can go anywhere in time and space, known as the TARDIS. Ian and Barbara learn that Susan and the old man are not from Earth, but they are from another planet. Concerned about all of this knowledge, the old man, known as the Doctor, decides to kidnap Ian and Barbara and set the controls in motion so they go whizzing off into another time and place. This time though, the TARDIS does land back into the Stone Age on Earth. While the Doctor finds out whereabouts on Earth they are, and whilst Ian and Barbara try and figure out what exactly has happened, the Doctor has been captured by some cavemen, and it's not too long until all of them are captured by these cavemen. Now they have to try and make their way to escape back into the TARDIS to have any hope of reaching back to their own time and place. The only way I can tackle this particular review of An Unearthly Child is kind of divided in three parts. So I'm going to talk about the first episode because it's a little bit detached from the rest of the story. So I'll talk about that, the pilot, then the story and everything surrounding this this very first story of Doctor Who, because that's an adventure in on itself. So if you do like what you see and hear in this review, please hit the subscribe button. Let's talk about this first episode, and wow, 60 years on, it still holds up. This is, for me, I would list this as must-see television, particularly this first episode, which I have mentioned in the Where to Start video that I've done quite recently on this channel. And I would, at the very least, this episode is probably one of the best first episodes to a TV series of all time. It's definitely up there amongst the very first episode of Game of Thrones, the first episode of Stranger Things, even sort of British dramas such as Coronation Street and EastEnders. It is just up there. Happy Valley, another sort of fine example. So if you've not watched any classic Doctor Who, or you just sort of maybe don't want to watch the full story of An Unearthly Child, do watch this first episode, because it is a masterclass of setting things in motion that we are still talking about 60 years later. But to delve into this first episode a little bit further, the whole four cast members are so good. Their chemistry is on point together. It's just fantastically performed by all four of them. William Hartnell, the Doctor, the old man, very teasing and I think a little bit manipulative at times, but I still had that twinkle in his eye. You know, he was sort of, you know, he was kind of a bit like sort of Yoda in Empire Strikes Back when he's just toying with Luke. He's doing the same for Ian and Barbara, and just toying with them and messing with them, and having these little one-off lines as well, as if sort of like speaking to the audience but not quite breaking that fourth wall. William Russell and Jacqueline Hill as Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright respectively, playing off against this veteran actor of William Hartnell, with them being established leads themselves, and definitely the hero and heroine of further Doctor Who adventures, particularly William Russell as Ian Chesterton. But the chemistry between Ian and Barbara as well is great to see, with Barbara sort of starting to believe the truth that the Doctor and Susan are giving, in terms of where they're from and what they can do, where Ian, not totally dismissive, but sort of like just can't comprehend it, and just a little bit angry with what's going on as well. And you can see their sort of friendship as well as school teachers, you know, concerned about this student, and even sort of doing like probably teachery type things of like, oh, I deliberately tried to trip up Susan when I gave her this math problem. And then we have Susan, played by Carol Ann Ford, and I'd say really, and no disrespect for her, it's more the material that she was given later on down the line in Doctor Who. But this is probably my favourite performance from her. She was very much more, gave Susan the more sort of mysterious persona to her character, especially when you first get introduced to her, when she's doing that sort of outer-worldly dance, and she was reading the French Revolution, and having the arguments with Ian and Barbara and the Doctor inside the TARDIS. Yeah, definitely far, you know, started off there, and then the character right at the end is like, do you know what, we just want you to scream all the time, which is, you know, sad, you know. She definitely deserved more as the stories went on in Doctor Who, but this this performance from her is brilliant. All being filmed under 60s BBC television, which was not really known at the time for its actual sort of dramas, or, you know, or serial television programs back in its day. It was more sort of like stage adaptations, or, you know, or like the Grandstand, or, you know, easy sort of things to make, where this was just so complex, you know, and which is what they wanted, and that is what they got. So yeah, to come up with this concept, which was by Sidney Newman, and get a very young and enthusiastic producer in terms of Verity Lambert, coupled together with another very young and enthusiastic director with Boris Hussein. And yeah, we definitely got some magic, particularly in this very first episode of Doctor Who. Like I said, it's not very easy to make, you know, and again, you can, when you watch sort of more sort of 60s Doctor Who, you can scoff at some of the mistakes that you can see, such as, like, you know, camera sort of banging into sets, probably a few boom mic drops, or a bit of fluff up of lines. But it was more to do with time and budget. You know, this was a very small budget for a drama or for a children's program when it was first conceived. And editing and rehearsing and filming, it was all done on a very timely budget as well. So there was no time to go back and reset everything, re-record everything, and edits and stuff. You know, stuff like that was just all done on the fly. It was basically live television. They were they were recording, and you know, if they did trip over a line, that's it. You just carry on. How they managed to make something like this and make it still watchable, and still, again, one of those musty episodes 60 years later, is an absolute credit for everyone on front of the screen and behind the screen. Particularly when the opening scene is the title sequence itself. It's amazing, and it's frightening. I mentioned that in my scariest moments video. The opening sort of shots of the time vortex ripping open, and you're having this psychedelic sort of trance of this time vortex, along with the music by Ron Grainer, and obviously remixed electronically by Delia Derbyshire. Yeah, you can see why this theme has stuck out throughout the 60 years of Doctor Who, obviously in various forms. But, you know, you go for that original in black and white, and yeah, it is a powerful title sequence. But this wasn't the very first episode to have been made. No, there was an original unaired pilot that was recorded a few weeks earlier in September of 1963. Structure remains the same in terms of how it all sort of came to be, in terms of being kidnapped and sent off into another distant time, but there was differences in dialogue and performances. So, for example, Susan said that her and her grandfather came from the 49th century. That was something that was removed. They wanted to keep the mystique of those characters. Susan, instead of reading the French Revolution during the school book, during school, she did a drawing, like an ink block sort of test, and sort of scribbled like a hexagon type of thing, looking like a bit of a TARDIS console. That was scrapped because Sydney Newman found it confusing. Why was she doing that? To me, it looked like she was drawing the TARDIS console and then quickly screwed up the piece of paper so no one sort of found it and sort of questioned where she got that design from. A few knocks and bangs that you can hear throughout this pilot. It is sort of fascinating to check out, actually, if you're a fan of television and how sort of TV was made during the 60s, and sort of emphasizes what I was saying in terms of, like, you know, they couldn't cut and start again because the TARDIS doors was trying to close shut and the crewman couldn't do it. It just, for whatever reason, just kept popping open again. And yeah, it was very distracting bang. So I imagine Maurice Hussein was absolutely pulling his hair out. I'd say the big difference was, though, the Doctor himself. William Hartnell's sort of characterization of the Doctor was a lot more gruffer, a lot more sterner, and kind of played like the villain of the piece. There was no sort of twinkle in the eye. There was no sort of like gentle mystique. It was all sort of very abrupt and forward. And there was a moment where it looked like he actually tricked Ian up to mess around with the controls of the TARDIS and give him an electric shock. So it was all very sort of more, I wouldn't say a darker tone, but just more of an abrasive tone. The original on-air pilot was seen as an absolute disaster that Sidney Newman ordered Verity and Maurice to reshoot and redo that first episode with all the changes that we do see today. And yeah, I would say probably rightly so in some of the areas, but that must have cost a lot of money to have done that, and a big risk on all their parts. Definitely done for the right reasons, but yeah, this is one of those weird sort of stories where kind of like Doctor Who was doomed to fail. You know, it was one of those projects that not everyone was on board with. The fact that it really could have gone terribly wrong, which I'll get to a little bit later in this review as well. It's a testament that there was faith in this show, and it's kind of been repeated quite a few times during Doctor Who's 60-year history. But I'm glad that they made those changes, and like I said, the original is definitely must-see TV. I do actually remember seeing the unaired version of this episode as part of the Lime Grove celebrations. I think that was broadcast during the 90s on BBC Two. I remember being 6 or 7. I was very young. That was probably one of my first sort of memories of watching Doctor Who as a child. But it was fascinating that one of them would have been that on-air pilot. So let's talk about the remaining 3 episodes where our heroes have been captured by cavemen known as the Tribe of Gum, where there's a power struggle within that tribe, where the one who is leader is the one who can make fire. And yeah, there's an interesting sort of drink along you could do with the second episode of Doctor Who, where the Doctor is smoking a pipe. You're not going to see that again, my fellow Whovians, where the caveman grabs the Doctor, and there's must have been 5 or 6 times where they say he made fire out of his fingers. You know, I like it. You know, it's just a fun sort of weird sort of like thespians who wanted to be on television for the first time, and nope, you're gonna be cavemen and go, man, woman, make fire, you know. To be honest, I think they were all very good. You know, the good characterizations for the dialogue that they were given. Shout out to the old woman who was also in the Peter Cushing Doctor Who movie Dalek Invasion of Earth, 2150 AD, that is. And yeah, she's pretty much the same old woman. It would have been really good if that was actually the descendant, because she was just, I can't remember the actress's name, but she was just great at being those just pain in the butt old women. You know, she in this episode, she was the one that thought that fire would bring danger and evil and destruction. It's kind of like a nice little analogy there. So yeah, she didn't do that, and I think she got polished off quite easily. And then yeah, she was kind of the same in the Dalek movie. She was one that tricked Susan and Mr. Weiler from being captured by the Daleks. So yeah, nagging old woman. Great moments here that you just will never ever see again in Doctor Who. Like aforementioned, the Doctor smoking this huge pipe. The most darkest moment, I think this happens in episode 3, where one of the cavemen are injured and the crew of the TARDIS have their chance to escape, but they couldn't, you know, morally leave this person to die. So they are, you know, sort of nursing him to health, as well as sort of helping him back to his tribe. But whilst Ian, Barbara and Susan were distracted, the Doctor was gonna smash his head in with a rock and go, oh, it's polished off. Oh, well, let's go back to the TARDIS, you know. Again, something that you would never see again. And this is what I kind of like. I know it's sort of like you watching this retrospectively, but it's kind of, for me, throughout this whole 4-part adventure, you kind of think that the Doctor is the know-it-all. You know, he's the all-seeing and all-knowing, and that obviously develops throughout the 60-year history. But here, he's not. You know, he is the man of great intelligence, absolutely, but he's incredibly flawed. And when he's been put in a situation that he's not in control of, I think he starts to sort of go to pieces a little bit, in terms of, you know, he just wants to, I think his only remit for him was, if he had an opportunity, he would have just grabbed Susan and leave Ian, Barbara, and off they went. You know, he didn't have that, you know, he could quite easily disregard life quite quickly. But I think that's more out of fear for his own life and his own safety. Obviously, that's something that evolves, and I think that's because of his attachment and his relationship to the humans. And I think it all started off with Ian and Barbara. I think they humanized the Doctor in a way, so he does care for life, and he does know right from wrong. Obviously, I know he knows that he was doing wrong at that moment, but yeah, a very dark scene, and I would love to know in the comments, what do you think of that particular scene? And speaking of dark moments, there's a really violent scene going off in part 4 when 2 cavemen are battling it out to each other to the death. And although it is tastefully done, you know, it's a really sort of well choreographed scene. And again, the caveman ends up grabbing this huge boulder and smashing his other guy's skull in. And just, I think because it's all in the sort of blanket of night, and all you see is these sort of like flames and torches, and just the reactions from Barbara and Susan watching this all play out, you know, because they couldn't do anything about it. They had to just see and watch it all happen. Yeah, some really well filmed choreography going on there, and a really filmed out scene. As I mentioned earlier, with the Doctor sort of falling apart, I know it's a bit sort of stereotypical probably of its time, but obviously we have to talk about Susan, just from this mysterious lady into screaming teenager, just frightened of everything. But I think if anyone, Barbara the one that goes to pieces. But I kind of understand why that happened. You know, I think she was holding it together because, you know, she felt like, right, she's the adult, I'm gonna have to look after Susan and everything else. But by the end of this adventure, she's like, oh my god, I've had enough. She's on verge of nervous breakdown. And again, I think it's pretty well performed by Jacqueline Hill. And I think if you were in that situation, or I was in that situation, I think I would just break down as well. It's yeah, it's something you was not expecting. You know, 1 minute he was going to go home, I'll just have a word with one of my students' guardians, go home, watch some telly, have a bag of chips, not whiz off to 10,000 BC or beginning of the Stone Age and nearly, you know, fighting for my life. But after all that, they do make it into the TARDIS at the end of part 4, spoilers, and where the Doctor brings out other good news, especially for Barbara. Oh yes, we can go home. No, I don't know how to pilot the TARDIS properly. I don't have the codes. I don't have the coordinates. They've been taken off me by my own race. So we're just going to basically put the TARDIS on shuffle and off we go. So, and thus the adventures continue. So that, you know, that's poor Barbara, poor Ian. And there you go, after 4 parts, that's the very first Doctor Who story, An Unearthly Child. Was it a roaring success back in 1963? No, absolutely not. This was an uphill struggle right from the get-go. Mostly, though, because televised-wise, the original episode was broadcast the day after President Kennedy was assassinated. So obviously the audience figures were nowhere near that, and, you know, understandably so. That was one of the most shocking things in history. So much so that they did repeat the episode again the week later, and then for the other subsequent episodes. And yeah, the figures were okay, but definitely not what the BBC wanted it to be. And yeah, at that point, Doctor Who was on very thin ice. It was on the, literally, no pun intended, on the edge of destruction and cancellation. And, well, you know, that's a story for another time. What do I think overall? Well, I'm going to give An Unearthly Child a TARDIS rating of 7 out of 10. And most of that is going to be for the first episode itself, because, yeah, like I said, it's probably one of the best first episodes of an opening television series of all time. But the rest of the episodes, although not the out-and-out classics of Doctor Who, but I wouldn't say it's terrible either. You know, yes, there is some issues in terms of the sets and the acting and some of the camera work, particularly Ian rubbing 2 sticks together to make fire, but the sticks don't touch, just in case they do actually set on fire. I'm assuming that's why they did that, but again, that's 60s television, and you wouldn't have picked that up from a small TV screen back in 1963. So I'm not going to hold that against this show. But yeah, I think story-wise, it's good. I think it does hold up today. I think it is worth checking out. Like I said, it does have its problems, but I think equally it's a fascinating look of not only early Doctor Who, but early 60s television. And like I said, this is a story that was to a point doomed to fail, with you know, people not being fully on board with the project from the higher ups of the BBC, the struggles that they had at Lime Grove Studio, the struggles of outside interference, mainly the Kennedy assassination. So it's an absolute wonderment that not only did this story survive as well when the BBC decided to pretty much junk most of their programs from the 50s and the 60s. So the fact that we still got that and still able to watch it is a wonderment in itself. But the show did survive. Again, that's a story for another time, but you know, it's and something, you know, that brings up quite a lot, especially modern Doctor Who, in terms of wokeness. You know, this has all been banded together by a group of individuals that has made what Doctor Who is. It is inclusive to all. You know, you've got a producer who's one of the first female producers in television history, British television history, with a Jewish heritage. Sydney Newman, who emigrated from Canada to be head of drama for the BBC, who concocted this adventure in space and time. A director from British India who had to sadly hide his homosexuality for quite a number of years, all banding together to tell a legacy-defining story of a mysterious old man with his granddaughter and two school teachers from Earth who have to work together as they navigate all their perils and adventures in space and time. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts too on Unearthly Child. Is this one of your favourite Doctor Who stories of all time, or where would you rank this amongst other stories from Doctor Who? Thank you for being part of the celebrations of Doctor Who's 60th anniversary by watching this video. I've got a lot more celebratory reviews coming up on this channel. You can already watch the 3 Doctors as part of Doctor Who's 10th anniversary right now on the Timey Wimey Review YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please like, share and subscribe. Hit the cloister bell for more notifications. Come say hello and follow me on Facebook and X. And do check out my other fantastic Doctor Who related content on the Timey Wimey Review TikTok page and right here on the Timey Wimey Review YouTube channel. And as a good doctor once said, have you ever thought what it's like to be wanderers in the 4th dimension?